I used to love going to McDonald's. The smell of fries, the sound of happy kids, and the bright colors always made me feel good. But one night changed everything for me. It was a rainy Friday evening, and I was feeling hungry after a long week. I drove to my favorite McDonald's, ready for a Big Mac and a large fries. The restaurant was busy, filled with families and people chatting. I placed my order and found a seat by the window. As I waited for my food, I noticed something odd. There was a man sitting alone in the corner. He looked out of place, dressed in a dirty brown coat and an old hat. He was staring at me. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I tried to ignore him. Maybe he was just tired or lost. My food arrived, and I dug in, the warm burger and crispy fries making me feel better. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the man was still watching me. Every time I looked up, his eyes were fixed on me. I started to feel uneasy. After a while, I finished my meal and decided to leave. As I walked past the man, I couldn't help but glance at him. He was still staring, his eyes dark and empty. "What's wrong with you?" I thought, but I didn't say anything. Just as I reached the door, I heard a raspy voice behind me. "You shouldn't have eaten here." I turned around, my heart racing. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to sound brave. He leaned closer, and I could smell something rotten on him. "This place is cursed. They say if you eat here after dark, you might never leave." I laughed nervously. "Yeah, right. It's just a fast food place." He shook his head slowly. "You'll see. Just remember, you were warned." I didn't know what to think, but I brushed it off as the ramblings of a crazy man. I pushed the door open and stepped outside. The rain had stopped, but the night was dark, and the streets were empty. As I drove home, I couldn't shake the man's words. "Cursed," I thought. "That's ridiculous." But the more I thought about it, the more uneasy I felt. I decided to forget it and turned up the radio. When I got home, I settled in for the night, but I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing strange noises outside, like whispers in the wind. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but deep down, I felt something was wrong. The next day, I woke up feeling exhausted. I didn't want to think about the man or his warning, so I went about my day as usual. I even visited another McDonald's for lunch. But as I bit into my burger, I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I pushed the food away, my stomach churning. That night, I had terrible dreams. I dreamt I was back at the McDonald's, but it was empty. The lights flickered, and the air felt thick and heavy. I could hear faint whispers echoing around me. "You shouldn't have eaten here," they said. I woke up in a cold sweat, heart racing. Days went by, and I tried to forget about that night. I didn't want to let a stranger scare me, but every time I passed a McDonald's, I felt a knot in my stomach. I stopped eating there altogether. One weekend, my friends invited me to a party. They insisted I join them, and I thought maybe some fun would help me relax. As I drove to the party, I noticed a McDonald's along the way. It looked different in the dark, almost sinister. I quickly looked away, not wanting to think about it. At the party, I had a great time, laughing and dancing, but as the night went on, I felt a strange urge to leave. I made up an excuse and told my friends I needed to go home. On my way back, I couldn't resist the urge to stop at the McDonald's. "Just one burger," I told myself. "I'll be fine." I pulled into the parking lot, feeling a mix of excitement and dread. As I walked inside, it was quieter than usual. The bright lights felt harsh against the dark night. I stepped up to the counter and ordered a burger. The girl behind the register smiled, but there was something strange about her smile. It felt forced, almost too wide. I took my food and found a seat. As I bit into the burger, I noticed the taste was off. It was dry and flavorless, unlike the burgers I remembered. I forced myself to swallow, but I felt sick again. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and I heard whispers, "Leave now," they said. "You shouldn't be here." I looked around, but no one else seemed to notice. The girl at the counter was still smiling, but her eyes were vacant. I stood up, my heart pounding, and rushed for the door. Just as I reached the exit, I felt a hand grab my shoulder. I turned around, and it was the same man from before, the one in the dirty coat. "You came back," he said, his voice low. Now it's too late. Panic washed over me. "What do you mean?" he stammered. He leaned closer, and I could see his eyes were wild, filled with fear. "They're hungry. You have to leave before they take you." Without thinking, I pushed past him and ran outside. The parking lot was empty, the only sound my heavy breathing. I jumped into my car, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I pulled out of the lot, I glanced back. The man was standing by the door, looking at me with a sad expression. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. The girl from the counter was right behind him, her smile twisted into a horrifying grin. She pointed at me as I drove away, and I felt a chill grip my heart. I didn't stop until I got home, where I locked all the doors and turned on every light. I sat in the living room, shaking, trying to understand what had just happened. Was it all in my head, or was there something truly wrong with that McDonald's? The following days were filled with anxiety. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I avoided fast food places, and every time I saw McDonald's, I felt sick. Then, one evening, I received a call from a friend. He sounded frantic. "Did you hear what happened at McDonald's?" he asked. "No, what?" I replied, feeling a knot in my stomach. "Last night, a family went missing there. They found their car abandoned in the parking lot. People say it's haunted." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The man's warning echoed in my mind. "You shouldn't have eaten here." I realized then that the man had been trying to warn me all along. Whatever was happening at that McDonald's, it was real, and I had narrowly escaped. From that day on, I couldn't look at a burger without feeling sick. I told my friends what happened, and they believed me, but I could see they thought I was crazy. I never went back to that McDonald's, or any fast food place for that matter. The last time I drove by that location, I saw the restaurant was closed. A "for sale" sign hung in front, and I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Part of me wanted to forget the whole thing, but the other part knew that something dark had lurked there. As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror one last time. The parking lot was empty, but I could swear I saw the man in the dirty coat standing at the edge, watching me leave. I still wonder about that night, about the whispers and the darkness that surrounded that McDonald's. I learned my lesson. Some places are better left alone, especially when you're hungry. I used to think McDonald's was just a fun place to grab a burger and hang out with friends. But one night, my view changed forever. It was a Friday evening, and I was feeling really hungry after a long week at school. I gathered some friends, Jake, Mia, and Sarah, and we decided to go to the McDonald's in our town. It was one of those places that always felt alive, with bright lights and laughter echoing in the air. As we walked in, the smell of fries and burgers made my stomach growl. We ordered our food, and after grabbing a booth near the window, we settled in and started eating. The place was packed, with families and kids running around, but I noticed something strange. In the corner of the restaurant, there was a man sitting alone. He looked old and worn out, with a scruffy beard and a dirty jacket. He was staring at us, or at least it felt that way. I tried to ignore him, but his gaze was unsettling. "Who's that guy?" Jake asked, noticing the man too. "I don't know," I replied. "Maybe he's just waiting for someone." We continued our meal, laughing and joking, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the man was watching us. Every time I looked up, he seemed to be staring directly at me. "Let's go play in the play place," Mia suggested, trying to lighten the mood. We all agreed, wanting to have some fun. We jumped up and headed to the colorful play area filled with tunnels and slides. As we climbed inside, the laughter from the restaurant faded away, replaced by the sounds of our voices echoing in the tubes. After a while, we decided to take a break and sat down at a table in the play place. That's when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. The old man had followed us. He stood at the entrance of the play area, his eyes locked on me. "Guys, look," I pointed, feeling a chill run down my spine. They turned to look, but by the time they did, the man was gone. "You're just seeing things," Sarah said, rolling her eyes. "Yeah, maybe he just left," Jake added. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. We decided to go back to our booth, and as we made our way, I saw the old man again. This time, he was sitting at a table near the back, staring at his food, which looked untouched. I felt uneasy but tried to push it aside. After we finished eating, we decided to leave. As we walked to the door, I glanced back one last time. The man was still there, but now he was looking at us, a strange smile on his face. "Let's go," I urged my friends, and we hurried out into the parking lot. As we got into my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I glanced in the rearview mirror, and for a brief moment, I saw the man standing outside the restaurant, staring at us as we drove away. That night, I tried to forget about it. I laughed and joked with my friends, but I kept thinking about the old man. The next day, we decided to go back to McDonald's for lunch. This time, I felt nervous, but I didn't want to let my friends know. When we arrived, the restaurant was crowded again, but I didn't see the man anywhere. I relaxed a little and enjoyed our meal. We sat at the same booth and joked around, trying to forget about the weirdness of the previous night. But just as we were finishing up, I noticed something strange. The old man was back, sitting at the same table in the back. He looked even worse than before, his hair disheveled and his eyes sunken. He was staring at us again, and I felt a wave of fear wash over me. "Guys, we need to go," I said, my voice shaking. "Why?" Mia asked, looking confused. "Just trust me," I urged, and we quickly left the booth. As we walked toward the exit, I felt like the old man's eyes were burning into my back. I didn't dare to look. Just as we reached the door, I heard a low whisper behind me. "Don't leave." I spun around, but there was no one there. The old man was gone. I was breathing heavily now, and my friends looked worried. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Hear what?" Jake replied, glancing around. "Never mind," I said, feeling foolish. "Let's just get out of here." We left the restaurant, but as I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. That night, I had nightmares. I dreamt I was back at McDonald's, but the restaurant was empty, the lights flickering. I wandered through the aisles, calling out for my friends, but no one answered. The whispers grew louder, echoing around me. "Don't leave." I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart racing. I needed to talk to someone about this. The next day, I told my friends about my dreams. They laughed it off, saying I was just being paranoid, but deep down, I knew I couldn't ignore it. I decided to go back to McDonald's one last time. This time, I wanted to confront the man. When I arrived, I was nervous. The restaurant looked the same, bustling with families and kids. I took a deep breath and walked to the back. To my relief, the old man wasn't there. I sat down at a booth, trying to relax. As I waited, I watched the people around me. Families laughed, kids played, and for a moment, I felt at ease. But then, I noticed something. The employees were acting strange, whispering to each other, and casting nervous glances at the door. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash. Everyone turned to look. A tray had fallen from the counter, and the girl behind the register looked terrified. I felt a sense of dread wash over me. "Excuse me," I said to the manager, who was standing nearby. "Is everything okay?" He glanced at me, his face pale. "Just a little bit of chaos. Nothing to worry about," he said quickly. But I could see the fear in his eyes. Just then, The door swung open, and in walked the old man. The chatter in the restaurant went quiet. He slowly made his way to the counter, and everyone stared. I felt my heart race. "What's going on?" I whispered to myself, watching the man approach. He reached the register and leaned in close to the cashier. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I saw the girl's face turn white. She looked terrified. "Maybe we should leave," I whispered to myself, feeling a knot in my stomach. Just then, I heard the whispers again. "Don't leave, don't leave." They echoed in my mind, louder than ever. I stood up, ready to run, but then the old man turned and locked eyes with me. His gaze was piercing, and I felt paralyzed. I couldn't move. Suddenly the lights flickered, and the temperature dropped. The laughter of the children turned into screams. I looked around in panic, and the once busy restaurant now felt like a haunted ghost town. "Leave!" I screamed, and my friends who had been standing nearby looked at me in confusion. "What's happening?" Mia shouted over the chaos. But before I could answer, the old man began to laugh, a low, eerie laugh that sent chills down my spine. "You should have listened," he said, his voice echoing in the silence. At that moment, I knew we had to get out. I grabbed my friends and pushed toward the exit. The old man's laughter grew louder behind us, mixed with the whispers that filled the air. As we burst through the doors, I glanced back one last time. The old man was standing at the entrance, a dark smile on his face. We ran to my car and jumped inside, breathing heavily. I started the engine and drove away as fast as I could. We didn't speak until we were miles away from that McDonald's. "What just happened?" Jake asked, still trying to catch his breath. "I don't know, but I'm never going back there again," I said, my heart still racing. From that day on, I avoided McDonald's like the plague. The old man's laughter haunted my dreams, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something dark lingered there. I learned that sometimes a simple fast food place can hide the darkest secrets, and some warnings are better taken seriously. I used to think of McDonald's as just a fun place to eat, but after what happened one night, I can't see it the same way anymore. It all started on a Friday evening. My friends, Jake, Mia, and Sarah, decided to go to our local McDonald's after school. We were all craving burgers and fries, and the idea of hanging out together made it even better. When we arrived, the bright lights and the smell of fresh fries welcomed us. We ordered our food and grabbed a booth by the window. The restaurant was busy, filled with families and kids playing in the play place. I loved the lively atmosphere, and we chatted and laughed while we ate. But then, I noticed something strange. In the corner of the restaurant, there was a man sitting alone. He looked old and ragged, with a scruffy beard and a long, dirty coat. His eyes seemed to follow us, especially me. I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Who's that guy?" Jake whispered, glancing at the man. "I don't know," I replied, trying to sound casual. Maybe he's just waiting for someone. We continued to eat, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the man was watching me. Every time I looked up, he seemed to be staring right at me. It made me feel uneasy, and I wanted to get up and leave. After we finished eating, we decided to play in the play place. "Let's go have some fun," Mia said, and we all agreed. It was nice to forget about the creepy guy for a while. As we climbed through the tunnels and slid down the slides, I could hear laughter and joy all around. But every so often, I would glance back at the restaurant. The man was still there, sitting alone, staring at us with those hollow eyes. "Let's take a break," I suggested, feeling tired. We crawled out of the play place and found a table to sit down and catch our breath. But the moment we sat down, I noticed that the man had moved. He was now standing at the entrance to the play place, watching us with an intense gaze. "Guys, look," I said, pointing. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, looking concerned. "The man from before is watching us again," I said, feeling my heart race. "Chill out. "He's just sitting there," Jake said, rolling his eyes. "You're being paranoid." But I couldn't shake the feeling. There was something wrong with that man. I looked away, trying to focus on my friends and not let my imagination run wild. Eventually, we decided it was time to leave. As we walked to the door, I glanced back one last time. The man was still there, but now he had a strange smile on his face, a smile that sent chills down my spine. "Let's get out of here," I urged my friends, and we hurried outside into the cool evening air. I felt relieved to be away from the restaurant. As we drove home, I couldn't stop thinking about the man. What was his deal, I wondered. That night, I tried to shake off the uneasiness. I laughed and joked with my friends, but deep down, I felt a nagging worry. The next day, we decided to go back to McDonald's for lunch. I felt nervous, but I didn't want to let my friends know. When we arrived, I was relieved to see the man wasn't there. We ordered our food and settled at a booth again. But halfway through our meal, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. The old man was back, sitting at the same table in the back. He looked worse than before, his eyes sunken and wild. I felt a wave of panic wash over me. "Guys, we need to go," I said, my voice trembling. "Why? We just got here," Mia protested. "Just trust me," I insisted, and we quickly got up to leave. As we walked toward the exit, I could feel the old man's gaze burning into my back. I didn't dare to look. Just as we reached the door, I heard a low voice behind me. "Don't leave." I turned around, but the old man was gone. My heart raced. "Did you guys hear that?" I asked, looking at my friends. "Heard what?" Jake replied, confused. "Never mind," I said, feeling silly. "Let's just get out of here." We left the restaurant, and I tried to shake off the weirdness of the day, but the thought of the old man kept creeping into my mind. That night, I had nightmares. I dreamed I was back at McDonald's, but the place was empty and dark. The lights flickered, and the air felt thick. I wandered through the aisles, calling out for my friends, but no one answered. The whispers filled the air, "Don't leave." I woke up in a cold sweat, heart racing. I needed to talk to someone about this. The next day, I told my friends about my dreams, but they just laughed it off. "You're being silly," Sarah said. But I felt something was really wrong. I decided to go back to McDonald's one last time, determined to confront the man. When I arrived, I felt a mix of fear and courage. The restaurant looked the same, filled with people, and for a moment I felt relieved. I took a deep breath and sat at a booth, scanning the restaurant for the old man. To my relief, he wasn't there. I ordered my food and tried to relax, but then I heard a loud crash from the counter. Everyone turned to look, and a tray had fallen. The girl behind the register looked terrified. I felt a knot in my stomach. "What's going on?" I whispered to the manager, who was standing nearby. "Just a little chaos. Nothing to worry about," he said quickly, but I could see the fear in his eyes. Just then, the door swung open, and the old man walked in. The laughter in the restaurant faded to silence. He slowly made his way to the counter, and I felt a chill go down my spine. "What's happening?" I whispered to myself, feeling paralyzed. He leaned in close to the cashier, and I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could see her face go pale. I decided it was time to leave. I grabbed my friends and pushed toward the exit. The old man's laughter filled the air, echoing in my ears. As we rushed out of the restaurant, I glanced back one last time. The old man stood at the entrance, his smile wide and haunting. We jumped into my car, and I drove away as fast as I could. When we were far enough away, I finally let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "What just happened?" Jake asked, still in shock. "I don't know," I replied, shaking, "but I'm never going back to that McDonald's again." From that day on, I avoided that restaurant like the plague. I couldn't shake the feeling that something dark lurked there, something that wanted to keep me inside. As time went on, I heard stories from other friends about strange things happening at that McDonald's. Some claimed they saw the old man lurking around, and others said they felt a cold chill whenever they entered. I learned to trust my instincts. Sometimes, places that seem safe can hold secrets we're better off not knowing. Even now, whenever I drive past that McDonald's, I feel a knot in my stomach. I can't help but remember the man's haunting smile and the whispers that echoed in my mind. Some places are best left alone,